Hey everybody, welcome to the first week of the Legacy Premier League playoffs. We are sponsored by Card Hoarder, Wizard of the Coast, and Scott Moore. Make sure you check out all those sponsors. But hi, I'm Tana Grace, and with me, Edgar Magalhaes. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing great, Tana. Great to be here.
I'm pretty excited about today's match. I don't know if you're as excited as I am, but we got a sweet one lined up. But before we get into the players and the decks that we're seeing, let's take a look at the bracket so everybody can see, what's going to be happening over the next few days that we're going to be playing in these playoffs. As you can see, we got a pretty big bracket set up here. Everybody at the top is in what I like to call like the safe zone. Like they're in the winners part of the bracket. So if they do some more winning today, they're in a good shape. Everyone who loses is going to lose a stock and kind of fall down into the losers section of the thing down here. Everybody in the bottom half, though, if they lose, they're going home. So it's going to be win or go home for everybody at the bottom there.
Yeah, it's the first week where people are going to be eliminated if they lose, so it's going to be a lot higher stakes matches today.
Yeah, and so I kind of alluded to our matches. Let's go ahead and talk about the ones we're going to get to today. The one that you and I are covering are Andrea versus Javier, and then you're going to have Jarvis versus Eric, Emma versus Bryant, and Bonde versus Autumn. So a lot of big matches. There's a lot of big names and stuff as well. If you want to put in your 2 cents on who do you think is going to win these matchups today, don't forget that we have a poll on Twitter as well. So make sure you get your voice heard on there and who do you think is going to win these matches. But we're going to be focusing on Andre and Javier for the first one. I'm pretty excited about this. I don't know about you. It's not a deck you're really known for playing, but I know you've got a lot of experience with Delver variants in the past, and we've got a Delver mirror.
Yeah, a Delver mirror between two really accomplished players, but both with a lot of success in Legacy and a lot of success with Delver itself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Javier Dominguez is going to be playing what's considered, the best Delver deck, or quote unquote, like, the most played Delver deck right now, and that's just Rug Delver. Anything kind of standing out to you in this version of it?
No, it's pretty stock. It's a list that's been popularized recently by Daryl Ayers, a good friend of mine actually. He's playing the Hooting Mandrels Stifle build, which was really popular many years ago, kind of fell out of favor, and it's kind of picked it back up again recently.
Yeah, it brings back some good memories of like my first foray to Legacy was with Rug Delver. We didn't have all these cards legal yet, like Oko and Ren and Six hadn't been printed yet, but I remember a lot of these cards very, very fondly. Definitely interested to see if Oko can make an appearance today. It's been showing up in every format and definitely doing really, really well. And as we see that it's not a straight mirror when we go into Andrea Mengucci's version of the deck. I think he's playing the 4-color variant today.
Yeah, so the deck sacrifices a little bit of consistency in its mana base. You can see the one copy of Badlands, the one copy of Underground Sea. The Badlands especially is a little bit of a big hit because you are a 4x stays deck, but you do gain a lot of power. Gurmag Angler, even in this matchup, heads up against Hooting Mandrels. That's a pretty obvious step up in power level, and then you get access to Abrupt Decay, which gives you a lot of outs that regular Rug Delver decks don't really have.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of wondering do you think a big stress point in this match is going to be that 4th color? Like if, let's say, Javier lands a really impactful Wasteland, is that going to be enough to carry him through?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Usually the Delver mirrors they kind of play out one of two ways, right? Usually there's the low resource games and then the more medium, more high resource games. And in the low resource games, especially if Andrea is gonna like fetch a tropical island and a Badlands to try to cover all of his mana based considerations, one Wasteland could be the nail in the coffin. But if he manages to transition into that mid game, then he will probably feel the extra power of his more powerful spells.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely the thing. I think the shorter the game is, it definitely probably favors Javier. And if the game goes super long, like you said, I think the powerful cards are going to start rearing their ugly head for the Andrea Mengucci deck. Now, there's 2 Okos in Andrea's version here. We got 5 Planeswalkers in this deck. I remember as little as like 6 months ago, there were no Planeswalkers in most Delver decks. And Legacy is changing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely much different. Ren 6 and Oko both new additions. It offers another angle of attack, and Javier has one less copy of each of them in his deck. So if that card ends up being really impactful in the mirror, and I don't think either of us have much experience with Oko in the mirror specifically, but if it ends up being something that's really powerful, then it's he's definitely going to have a step up there with the extra copy.
Yeah, and it looks like the players are ready. And one of the most impactful things that I think in the matchup, it looks like Javier has won the die roll and will be playing first.
Yeah, one other thing that's worth noting is that neither player has any copies of True Name Nemesis, which is kind of where that Oko card used to sit on the curve. And that means that there's going to be less snowbally games, I believe, where one player isn't able to answer that.
Yeah, and you make a really good point with that. And I'd like to point out something that's in Andre's opening hand. There's a Spell Pierce there, usually a card that was one of the first cards that you would board out in the kind of Delver mirrors. You know, a card that was definitely lower on the power level in the matchups. This card is definitely finding a way to be a lot better now with cards like True Nemesis making their way out and Renin 6 and Oko being more prevalent. This card can definitely win some games or steal some spots that it might not have in the past.
Yeah, definitely a lot better than it's been. And we're gonna have to see how Javier chooses to jockey around that, because Javier also has 2 copies of Spell Pierce, but Mengucci I believe only has the one, so it's possible that we're gonna see that Javier just jamming into it and not respecting it that hard, and it could end up being a blowout.
So I got a question to ask you here. Is it ever correct to not Delver on the draw here?
I'd be pretty hard pressed not to.
Yeah, with Force
It's
of Will.
Yeah, I mean you have Force worst case scenario, and Javier only has 2 copies of Renin 6, right? Like we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
And even still, like one interesting thing that we're going to see, and one thing I'm really excited about, is that both of these players are really good legacy players, and they're both going to respect each other's play. And that could lead to some leveling decisions where Andrea perhaps will assume that Javier is more likely to make a play, like play around days, where if he was against a random opponent, he might not necessarily make this play.
Yeah, so you're thinking he might be thinking about lightning bolting the Delver maybe here, and leaving up Stifle instead of just jamming Renin 6.
Right, exactly.
We'll have to see. He's taking a long time here to make this decision, so I think that's definitely on his mind.
Yeah, Javier has the force backups, and it's possible that he thinks even if Andrea ends up dazing here, he can just force back, and then he's very far ahead on tempo, even if he's down resources. And since Andrea ends up having just the force instead, he's even on par on resources and ahead with the Ren and 6 in play. So it ended up working out really well for him.
Yeah, and this is a nightmare scenario in the Delver mirror. Like you get your turn 1 Delver Renin 6th, while
Yeah.
it's still a 1/1, but good for Andre. He's gonna have a Termagoyf here to back it up, and it's a big Termagoyf as well. So a single bolt doesn't answer it here. So at least he has something proactive here to kind of answer this Renin 6. Otherwise, he'd fall super far behind.
So we see Andrea fetching the volcanic here instead of like a Badlands, and I think a lot of people would have been pretty tempted to get Badlands there, just like assure all your colors are lining up, and then you can use your third fetch to fix any problems if there's a Wasteland. But I think Andrea is going to be prioritizing protecting his black sources in this matchup, considering there's so few of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's something that's definitely important. You pointed that out early before the match. Is you're gonna have to make sure that you don't, put yourself into a spot where your black mana can lose the game if it gets wastelanded. You definitely want to make sure that you don't have those in play if you can avoid it until you need them. It looks like Javier is going to be thinking about putting a Hooting Mandrills into play this turn. Is there a way that he can delve here? Yeah, that's what I say. He can remove both Ponders. It makes the Termagoyf shrink.
Yeah, if you getting rid of the sorceries is actually fairly powerful, if I'm not mistaken. The Delver deck only really has Ponders to boost that up, right? So
Yeah,
it's pretty unlike.
generally that's the only sorcery. Yeah.
Oh, and he's going for the lightning bolt first to so he can finish it off with the Ren and 6. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a really tight play here from Javier.
This is actually another big swing in Javier's favor, because Tarmogoyf, historically a card that is pretty good against Red Delver or Blue Red Delver for similar reasons, just because they're so hard pressed to answer it. So the fact that he got to cleanly answer that with just one lightning bolt and finishing it off with a Ren before it's a 4/5 or bigger is a pretty big deal. He's pretty far ahead. I'm going to be interested to see how Andrea gets back from this. I think it's going to have to involve a Gurmag Angler.
Yeah, Gurmag Angler, another big creature here, and it needs to be fast too because there's a lightning bolt in Javier's hand as well, and this Hooting Manager with a lightning bolt in this game really, really quickly. And he's got this Renin 6 in play that's going to be ticking up for, you've got to assume the rest of the game. Man, this Renin 6 on the play here was backbreaking.
Yeah, the die roll being really huge, like you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like Andre found some more cantrips off of his cantrip, so it's like another ponder is going to be happening here. And like you said, if he finds Gurmag Angler here, he could still Gurmag this turn.
Yeah, Gurmag Angler here, or I think even a Tarmogoyf next turn will probably be good enough to at least maintain parity again. The Tarmogoyf's going to be a 4/5.
Mhm.
It's going to be pretty difficult for Javier to answer cleanly, but he's going to need something quick because this Wasteland is a blank in the face of the Ren. The Spell Pierce is quickly becoming a blank as well. So Andre is definitely, and like he's even under attack, so he's just behind on basically every axis right now.
Yeah, thankfully he does have a brainstorm left over, and like you said, the spell pierce in Wasteland not very good. So,
Ooh,
was that 2 Okos?
what is that gonna do? So it's funny because last turn, Andrea he cast a ponder before playing his scalding turn, and that seems strange to me because he had just cast a ponder, and he was kind of it kind of felt like he was baiting out Daze a little bit. So I wonder if he saw one of these Okos with the first ponder and was kind of like hoping to get Dazed with the second ponder, and but Javier didn't have it, and but now he's just drawn it for turn. So this is going to be another big swing on Javier's friend.
Yeah, this Days, however, is going to ruin Andrea Mengucci's day here. Days usually not very good when you get up to 4 mana in the Delver decks, but the way they've been built nowadays, we have a lot more 3 drops in these decks with these Planeswalkers. So Days
Yeah,
a little more live as the game goes on than usual.
especially this 4-color build, like we were talking about before. The Rug Delver deck that Javi is playing with the Stifles is it feels a lot more traditional than these 4-color decks, or even some of the other ways that people build Rug these days. Where the Delver deck kind of feels more like a mid-range deck with just like an aggressive angle, and um, having all these 3 drops just makes you weaker to the days even in the mid game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Javier finding a Wasteland here, you got to believe that he's going to be going after the Black Source here. Wasteland is
Yeah,
not really something he's worried about on the other side. Plus, this does represent the Ren and 6, quote unquote, like Wasteland lock. You know, this Wasteland is going to be happening every turn for the rest of the game if Javier wants it to.
yeah, it could be enticing to get rid of the red source, to protect your Ren and 6 or the green source, just because there's more copies of Tarmogoyf than there are Gurmag Angler, and that's still kind of an issue. But I probably would have gone after the black source. It looks like he's just more worried about the Tarmogoyfs. There are 3 Tarmogoyfs left and only 2 Gurmag Anglers, so it could just be a number thing. And
There's
also the
also,
extra copy of Oko.
I was just about to say, there's the extra copy of Oko, which we see in Andre Maguchi's hand, and Andre is in a spot where I don't know if he's getting out of this here.
Well, he has the lightning bolt for the Ren and 6, so he's not at risk of being locked out. And if he can find, he doesn't know that there's this other wasteland come. Oh, he does. This wasteland came back from the Ren and 6, so he knows that his black source is likely going to be attacked this turn. But if he can manage to find a Gurmag Angler and a black source in 2 draw steps, it's pretty trivial to come back from that as long as he doesn't get bolted out of the game.
Yeah, and well, he is going to get bolted here from Javier down to 5, so now fetch lands are turned off for the rest of the game for Andre as well.
Yeah, and that force is pretty huge to eliminate some of Andrea's outs.
Yeah, I gotta think if a ponder or brainstorm gets put on the stack from Andrea here, Javier is going to immediately interact with it.
Totally, especially like you said, Andre is at 1, so if this Underground Sea gets wastelanded, Andre is going to need to draw Badlands naturally, as opposed to fetching for it.
Yeah, let's say this
That's
looks
what's
like a
coming.
hard spot. Let's see if there's anything that Andre can find from here. I don't know what it would be, but Brennan
Definitely
6
ain't that.
definitely not going to do it. Yeah. So first game, Javier Dominguez, Rug Delver. Yeah, we take a look. We get to actually watch the player sideboard. This is great.
So what's you've played a lot more Delver Mirrors than I have. I've seen a lot of different camps on this in terms of the number of forces to keep in, whether or not it's a play draw decision. Do you have any strong opinions on that? Do you think that they should always come out, never come out, play draw?
I think if you're going to say one way or the other, if they always come out or they never come out, then it's more in the camp of they always come out, just because,
Yeah, I think I agree with that too.
yeah, the games go a little bit longer. You don't want to be top decking Force of Will without a blue card in your hand. You don't like getting 2-for-1 in this matchup more than you can
Ooh.
avoid. So that's a big deal. I think it matters how soft you think you are to like turn 2 Ren and 6 on the draw, and that's a reason why you might see Spell Pierce get left in when it wasn't in the past. What got you excited? I heard you say, "Ooh."
I saw Javier just slide all 4 of his Delver secrets out of his deck, but then you slide them immediately back in. It looks like he's just keeping them off to the side though, just so that we see how he's sideboarding. It looks like he's boarding out all the Delvers, which I find pretty exciting, but also makes a lot of sense because, like we were talking about earlier, Andrea has a lot of copies of Ren and Six in his deck this weekend or
Yeah,
this
and
week.
yeah, and Javier's going to be on the draw in this game as well, so he may not want to put himself in a situation. This is something I do a lot of legacy testing and just theorizing with Lawrence Harmon, big time rug delver, just aficionado. And
Totally.
he asks this question like once a week in our chat, like on the draw in these matchups, should I be boarding out my delvers? And it's an interesting thing to talk about, and it's an interesting thing to think about. I think you may have to rebuild your sideboards if that's your plan that you want to do.
Yeah,
Um,
so Javi is keeping in all the forces while he's on the draw and boarding out his Delvers. Probably worried about getting snowballed, like we were talking about. And
mhm.
one other thing that's worth noting is that since Andrea's playing the black version, Andrea knows that Javier doesn't have any copies of True Name Nemesis, so he's less likely to. But it's still possible that he wants to bring in the Plague Engineers just to kill Delver secrets and trade with Hooting Mandrills. And if that ends up coming down and killing a Delver secrets, that's another big blowout.
Yeah, so like maybe Javier's just trying to, make his deck as unsusceptible as possible to the most likely draws that are bad for him out of Andre's deck.
Hmm.
I like this idea. This isn't something I've done too much. I've done it in the past against like Source to Plowshare decks. You used to like board out your Delvers and you would try to win with just the like True Name Nemesis. Like, and if you had another hexproof threat, if you had like Nimble Mongoose or something, you try to win that way against decks that had Source of Plowshares because there was, your deck would be so bad against those and Snapcaster Mages. But I normally don't board out my Delver secrets too often, so this is a pretty interesting and cool idea from Javier. It just
Yeah,
makes sense
totally.
too.
It does make a lot of sense. The only thing I'd be concerned about, I suppose, is like we were talking about earlier, Andrea's cards on power level are kind of just a little bit of a step up,
Mhm.
just in general. And I feel like if we thought that Javier had to go under him, kind of like he did in game one, that perhaps his sideboarding direction is moving away from that philosophy. But Javier is boarding in 3 copies of Submerge, which
Mhm.
means that he has a lot of um he has a lot of play against stuff like Gurmag Angler and opposing Tarmogoyfs after board, so perhaps that dynamic doesn't exist as much after board.
Yeah, interesting turn here from Andrea as well. He had the opportunity to play one of his 2 Termalites and didn't do it. And there's a
Yeah,
lot of reasons for that.
he opted to keep up the Spell Pierce. He also has Hydroblast. He just has a lot of interaction. I think he was
Mhm.
just worried about Javier just having some piece of interaction. It could have even been a Lightning Bolt, right? Because there's no sorcery in the yard yet, and then untapping and playing one of his own threats, and then Javier or Andrea is just stranded, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And that was a good spot. And like I think a lot of players would just jam their Termaglyph there. And there's so many
Yeah.
things that could go wrong. There's days, there's lightning bolt, like you said. There's a lot of ways that you can get punished for playing it there.
I
And
think
here.
Lightning Bolt might be one of the big ones because Andrea didn't have um he didn't really have a game plan to beat Days in the short game, right? He didn't have a third land lined up. He only had 2 mana threats. But I think if you ever trade your Tarmogoyf with a Lightning Bolt in this matchup, that's kind of just a blow up because that's something that should never happen at any point. Even if Days is going to trade with some piece of material at some point in this game, Lightning Bolt doesn't necessarily have to do that. So perhaps he was trying to avoid that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get into the part of talking about spell snare as well.
Oh,
There's
right.
there's a couple of those floating around in Javier's deck as well. So lots of reasons not to play the Termaglyph there. It was a very good play.
Yeah, and we were talking about how Spell Pierce is better than it used to be in Delver Mirrors, but it's still not the best card. And
Yeah, definitely.
Andrea, I'm sure, was worried about that card getting stranded, and you saw him just fire it off
Mhm.
against an end of turn brainstorm, even, right? So he
Right.
just wanted to trade it as quickly as possible and get it out of his hand.
Yeah, that's something we talk about when we talk about playing in these games, especially in the mirrors. It's like I think you're incentivized to possibly start leaving in Spell Pierce now, but you definitely want to just trade it as soon as possible for any
Right.
game.
Yeah.
You're
You want
like,
to get it on the stack.
yeah. And I gotta say, I like going after brainstorm. I don't care if it's an end of turn brainstorm or whatever. The thing is I think people don't interact with the card brainstorm enough.
Oh, definitely not. S- People always talk about it being one of the best cards in Legacy,
Yeah,
but they just seem to disrespect it still anyways. And
it's the best card legacy
it,
because it's uncounterable. Nobody ever does anything to it.
end of turn brainstorm is one of those funny things, right? Because it's the type of play that you see like really bad legacy players do and also really good legacy players, right? But so whenever your opponent's doing that, you're like, which one
What
is it?
level are they on? Yeah.
But Andrea knows that which camp Javi is on, so he probably wants to counter in that spot.
Yeah, interesting attack here from Andre as well. Termagoyf and a Termagoyf with a bunch of mana up. It's like, well, I could trade a bolt here for your Goyf, but it matters if there's a bolt on the other side. A lot of stuff going on. You still have to play around days. Really cool interaction here, and you're seeing one of the reasons for leaving Force of Will up in this matchup is just to have a clean answer to something like Termagoyf. Because once that card resolves, you saw how hard it is to remove.
Right.
Last game, Javier had to go through a lot of hoops to make that happen.
Yeah, and even in the spot, Andrea attacked and Javier just decided to take it. He only had one mana open, even with the lightning bolt, he was afraid of getting dazed, and so even in a spot like this where you're Tarmogoyf versus Tarmogoyf, he didn't want to block with it, so it's very difficult to deal with that card in play for the rug deck.
Mm-hmm. Looks like Javier is going to go for a run in 6 here, and as we can see, this is definitely going to resolve. Andre has just 2 lightning bolts here, but that does give him a little reach. He might be able to clean up some of this here.
Yeah, and he just jammed straight into a possible daze. Not sure if there's anything that tipped him off as to Andre not having it, but Andre only has 2 cards left, and perhaps Javier felt that it wasn't that big of a deal if it ended up happening.
Mm-hmm.
This Ren isn't like the most powerful thing in the world, right? Javier is kind of incentivized to block to protect it, and maybe that's even something that he doesn't want to do because of the possibility of lightning bolt, and he wants to create his lightning bolt for Andrea's Tarmogoyf at some point by blocking. So perhaps he doesn't even block on this turn cycle.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing here too. Like you could even just double bolt. Yeah, I was gonna say you could double bolt the Termagoyf, but it looks like there's gonna be an attack from Javier to getting the runs going.
This makes sense because the way Javier was playing, I did not expect him to block with that Tarmogoyf, and if he's not going to block with it, he's probably going to attack with it because Andrea is certainly incentivized to attack the Ren in 6.
Right, so it's almost like gaining 5 life in this spot by using Ren in 6, drawing an extra card, getting a little further ahead.
And getting ahead on the race as well, right? Because Javier was behind 1 turn on clock for the race, but now he's ahead a turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important thing in the matchup when you're playing these Delver mirrors is to find any way to get slightly ahead of your opponent and be the one initiating. That usually puts you far ahead in the match.
Looks like we're going to see Andrea go for the double bolt here. It's a good spot to do that. He only gets punished by another Force of Will, but even that is not too big of a blowout, obviously. And now we see the issue with these counter spells. Andrea on just a Force of Will. He could draw a land or a spell, and it would be good, but Javi definitely needed to brainstorm into some piece of gas there, but he did luckily hit.
Yeah, I would say he brought in Sylvan Library in this matchup too. That's something that I've seen people go back and forth on whether you should bring it in this matchup or not. But in the games like this, like the ones you said, like I think you call it high resource games, that card really can shine.
And it's consistent with his game plan, right? Like his boarding out Delver game plan, keeping a Force of Will, going up a little bit on resources after going down with the Force of Will, just maintain a little bit of parity, play a longer game. It's all very consistent. Javi's been making a lot of consistent plays.
Yeah, it definitely seems like he was rewarded for boarding out Delver in this matchup. He's been a lot less susceptible to anything like that from Andre.
Yeah, and we saw Andre with the 2 copies of Lightning Bolt in his hand for a long time, right? And if Javier had 2 Delvers instead of any of the 2 cards he drew, then it's possible that Andre would have been at parity as opposed to being pretty behind right now.
So you talked about it earlier about like possibly that was a big draw, but possibly getting the read of whether Andrea had a daze or not. And are you like I am? You do like the one test during the game. You're like, let's see if they have daze, and then they don't. And when they don't, you just disrespect it for the rest of the game. You just start jamming.
Definitely, and then as soon as they draw it, you just complain about how unlucky you got, even though you're jamming into it for 6 turns.
Yeah, I like this block from Javier too. It's like, well, if you have a Rin in 6, you got me. If you have another bolt, you got me. Like what am I gonna do?
Is Andrea able to delve here to kill both Tarmogoyfs? And if he is that something he wants to do? I'm not sure if he's actually capable of doing that. I don't believe so.
It does look like he's not. Yeah, Javier has every card type in his yard because he's the one Planeswalker is the problem.
Right.
And he has a Ponder in his yard. Yeah, so I don't think there's a way to do it. If that were the thing, with the way that Javier played his last turn, like, he brainstormed into what it looks like a threat, maybe that is something you want to consider there. And that's a good question to be asking. Do you think there's another threat in Javier's? If you knew that he boarded out Delvers, I think it's for sure yes, because you know that he's lighter on threats.
And it's worth noting that Javier brainstormed and didn't fetch, which shows a little bit more of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
The Sylvan library is not looking the best, but Javier is so far ahead on the clock here, and he has this lightning bolt that Andrea obviously doesn't know about. So if Andrea decides to attack here, then he's just going to be dead to it. But I doubt Andrea is going to attack. He's behind 2 full turns on the
Well,
clock. Ooh, wow.
the thing is like you're dead to bolt either way, right? Like if you block, he just bolts your Termaglyph, and then like you're probably not coming back from that, right? With just Force of Will in hand. So I think it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't situations.
Right, of course, and something that I was mistaken. I forgot that these scores are 5-6s, so this is giving Andrea the opportunity to draw a lightning bolt to win the game next turn. He's definitely playing to win here because he can't play a longer game against the Sylvan Library. That's just not a winning proposition.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's actually just a really good play from Andre
Yeah,
to do an
for
attack
sure.
there. Yeah, definitely like that a lot. And yeah, I mean, if you, it's harder for us to tell if it's actually a 5-6 or a 4-5 right here.
Yeah,
To say. Yeah, there we go. It's definitely a 5-6, but I like this play from Javier. It's kind of like checks to see if there's a counter spell or anything there. The upkeep, put it on top of your deck, and then all right, show you the bolt that's actually lethal.
for sure.
And
Yeah.
I have gotten to cast 2 matches in the Legacy Premier League. Both of them were with Javier Dominguez, and boy, is he being impressive in
He's
those 2 matches.
he's so good at Delver. I played against him in 2014 actually at Grand Prix Paris, and he was playing Delver before I even knew who he was, and I remember that match being incredibly difficult, and he played super well, and he's just been playing a lot of Delver decks this entire time, and it goes to show he's just very experienced.
Yeah, I mean, both these players, right? Like, are both known for not only being good at Legacy, but being good at these decks. I was going to say, PT25. I was in the Legacy seat, and I played against the team that had both of these players on it. Like, I played against Mengucci in the Legacy seat, and he beat the crap out of me. Like, the game was not close. Thankfully, we ended up winning the match a little bit. You know,
Oh, you got
Javier
a
a
little
little.
carried.
Oh, I got carried hard by Amaz and Brennan. That was pretty great, but. Yeah, I gotta say, like, it was a great match between both of them. They both showed a lot of understanding of the matchup. You know, you saw like the little things here or there, like playing around spots when they couldn't. I really liked that attack, even though it put Andre dead on board at the end because he was playing to win, not playing not to lose,
For sure.
which I'm a big fan of. We do have a match coming up after this one. It's between do you know who the next match is? I just blanked on it.
Yeah, it's Eric on Black Red Reanimator
Okay.
versus Jarvis Yu on Reclaimer, Rug Delver. So he's playing Rug
Yeah.
Delver as well. It's a Rug Delver week, but he's opting
Mhm.
to play the new card Elvish Reclaimer, which is
Mhm.
something that has picked up recently. I think
Yeah.
again Daryl wrote about it in one
Yeah.
of his articles,
I
and
feel like Daryl is like the one kind of making the wheels go on Rogue Delver
yeah,
right now, and that's that difference in the deck. He's got 2 Reclaimers main. It's going to come up big in this matchup against Black Red, right?
totally. It's more 1 mana threats, and
Mhm.
I'm not 100% sure if he has
He's got
access to a big Yuga Bog.
he has Caracas and Bajuka Bog.
Oh wow! So he came ready. He knew he was
Okay,
playing against Landon, so that makes a lot of sense. It's 2 sideboard slots that ends up representing a lot if Eric ends up playing his namesake deck,
right.
um, and he
Which
ends
why
up
wouldn't he,
getting paid
right?
off for that. Right? Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's the playoffs. The guy's got a 70 something win percentage rate online with the deck, and I'm looking at the sideboard here from Jarju to kind of spoil it a little bit for our next match. But I'm seeing 2 Grafdigger's Cage, a Crop Rotation, a Caracas, and a Bajuka Bog. He
He came
came
for it.
ready. Yeah,
Yeah.
and see that's something about like the Legacy League, right? Like you get that small meta game, and like it makes for interesting decisions, right? You make small little choices in your deck, and with this many ponders and brainstorms, you can get really rewarded for that.
For sure. Yeah, and there's a lot of metagaming back and forth. Eric leveled last week, or 2 weeks ago rather, in the group stages. He ended up playing Burn instead of Black Red Reanimator, caught me myself off guard.
Mhm.
But this time he went for his tried and true, and maybe Jarvis expected that, and he got paid off for his decision there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be a great match. I'm looking forward to it. I know you are, and we'll have it as
Hmm.
soon as we get back for some from just a short break, right?
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun, and see y'all later.